It was a rainy Friday night, the kind of rain that makes the road disappear beneath you. Sarah, a nurse and a mother of two, was driving home after a long shift at the hospital. She was exhausted, she was distracted, and her tires lost grip of the road, and the car slammed into the guardrail, and the world spun in that moment for her. She sat slumped in her seat, the dashboard blinking red, rain pattering on the windshield like a drumbeat. She was disoriented, and then the pain started to hit. She was bleeding, and she could not reach phone to ask for help. She was waiting. A pastor drove by. He was late for a meeting. He said a quick prayer, and then he kept going. A well-known civic leader drove by. She saw the wreckage, slowed down, and then passed and said, I figure someone else will call for help. Then came a third car. A man stepped out. His hands were shaking slightly as he approached. He had every reason to keep driving. He was vulnerable in ways that made being seen dangerous, but he knelt in the rain anyway. He gently checked Sarah's breathing. He called 911, and he waited with her until help arrived, and then he slipped away. Later, when the story circulated, some were surprised. Him? That guy? But for Sarah, there was no question. That man was her neighbor. Jesus calls us to a kind of seeing that shapes and reshapes what we think about neighbors and what we believe we owe to each other and are responsible for. Teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life? That's the question that opens Jesus' parables. The man asking is a legal expert. He is a faithful Jew. He already knows the answer, and he gives it to him. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and your neighbor as yourself. And Jesus affirms this. He says, do this, and you will live. But the man is seeking clarity or a loophole, as it says in the text that we read today, or maybe just some limits, some boundaries around that neighbor concept. And he asks, who is my neighbor? I think that's a question we're asking today. Who is my neighbor? Who is your neighbor? Jesus does what he does often. He doesn't answer questions. You notice that? He sometimes will ask another question, or he'll tell a story or a parable like he did. And this parable, make no mistake about it, is meant to unsettle you. It is meant to make you uncomfortable. It really is. As Pastor David Lose puts it, he said, parables aren't so much instruction manuals as they are cornea transplants. They're intended to change the way that you see reality. And to take that step further, Rob Bell likes to say that parables should be treated like diamonds. We should turn them slowly in the light. For each angle offers a different perspective, a different challenge, a different truth. And the goal with parables is not to beat it into submission to find that one truth. It's to continue to turn it, to let it surprise us, to let it challenge us, to let it help us to see in new ways. Parables are not answers as much as they are doorways. They won't give us a quick fix, but they will help us live with better questions. And this is a great question. Who is our neighbor? Before we turn to the gem of this parable, I want to turn briefly to the words that Jessica read earlier today. Amos is a shepherd. He's not ordained. He has no training in being a prophet. He is a common person. He is any one of us. Yet God calls him to speak truth to a nation that on the surface looks successful, but beneath the surface is deeply unaligned with God's justice. And God shows Amos a plumb line, a tool to measure what is straight. And he says, I'm going to measure my people not by how they worship, but whether or not they are acting justly. Amos speaks out against exploitation. He speaks out against cruelty. He speaks out against comfortable religion, and he's told to shut up. Have you been told to shut up? He's told to keep religion private and polite. Have you been told to keep religion private and polite? I know I have. But Amos refuses. He holds the plumb line, even when the cost is high, even when people want him to shut up. I think we need people like Amos today. People willing to speak the truth with love, to measure our laws, our speech, our compassion against God's justice revealed so clearly in the Scriptures and in our tradition. I think we need people like Amos, people willing to be unpopular with their own family, their own neighbors, their own political tribe, people who are willing to pledge allegiance to a higher law, a higher calling. Because right now, there is a lot that is out of alignment. And we need both the plumb line of Amos and the mercy of the Good Samaritan more than ever. So let's turn to the parable, turn to the gem. Again, not to master it, but to let it master us. Let it speak to us. Let it challenge us. And I want to offer 3 different perspectives. The first angle is the one who stops. That's the version that you're probably most familiar with. It's the one that was taught in Sunday school. It's a morality tale. A priest and a Levite, they walk by. The Samaritan stops. He sees, he helps, he does what he can, and Jesus says, be like that one. Go and do that. In a world where people are passed by, ignored, dismissed, excluded, and even vilified, this version still matters. This is a good story. For there are people that are wounded in poverty, people that are being left on the roadside of healthcare, immigration systems, hunger, racism, people suffering silently from PTSD, from depression, from shame, from fear. People pass not because we don't see them, but because we've forgotten how to stop. To be a neighbor in Jesus' view is not about what worship service you attend, what kind of music you like, what hymnal you sing out of. It's about whether or not you are willing to follow in the footsteps of Jesus and to act justly and to show up with mercy for one another. At Westside, the 4th and final core value is the most important, acting justly. Notice the word acting. It's not about believing about justice, not believing the right things. That's important, but it's doing it. It's acting it. Not just writing checks, which is great, but crossing boundaries, crossing barriers. Not just being nice, which, by the way, you won't find that anywhere in the Bible. It's about being neighborly, being neighborly. Fred Rogers loved to tell this story that when he was a boy and tragedies happened as they just did in Texas, as they're happening all over the world all the time, his mother taught him to look for the helpers. For in every tragedy, there are those helpers that are rushing in to do their part. Our mission team is going to help right now in Clay County. Look to the helpers. And Jesus isn't just saying look for them. He's saying be a helper. Be a helper. Thomas Burton said, at the end of my life, the most important prayer is, Lord, how can I be helpful? How can you be helpful today? Angle number 2 is the one we least expected. This version shifts the focus to the offense of who Jesus chooses as the hero. Samaritans were the enemy of the Jews. So when Jesus is telling this story to a Jewish legal scholar, it's as if he's saying, you want to find life? Then learn from the one that you've been conditioned to hate. Learn from the one you've been conditioned to hate. It's like telling the parable of the good climate activist at the fossil fuel conference, right? It's meant to disrupt our categories of us and them. Fill in your own version of them. Think of the person that you've been conditioned to hate, and as much as you tried not to hate him, they just make your blood boil. If Jesus were to tell you that parable, he would choose him or her or them as the hero of the story. Dr. Martin Luther King calls the kind of love that Jesus is inviting us to as dangerous altruism. Dangerous because it crosses tribal lines. It challenges comfort zones. It risks something for the sake of healing. And I think it speaks directly to the moment we find ourselves in today, where we're being encouraged to vilify outsiders, where we've been taught that disagreement is disloyalty, and where compassion for the wrong people is labeled betrayal. We can do better. We are called to do better. Jesus reminds us that mercy has no allegiance except to love. And love, when it's practiced in the way that Jesus wants us to practice it, is always risky. And it's never popular. Angle number 3, the one in the ditch. What if Jesus isn't just inviting us to identify with the helper, but also the one who's being helped? Because whether we admit it or not, all of us find ourselves in the ditch at some point in our lives, beaten up by life, wounded with grief, wounded with illness, wounded with regret, wounded with fear. Mitch Albom told the story in Tuesdays with Maury. His mentor, Maury, was nearing the end of his life, and Mitch walked alongside him in those final weeks and days. And one day, Maury said to him, "Mitch, I'm leaving the world that I came in need of love." You see, Mitch had to clean him up after he went to the bathroom. He said, "I'm going out the way that I came in. I just wish I hadn't forgotten how much I needed others while I was busy making it." We're all born dependent. If we live long enough, we die dependent. And the reality is, you're dependent now. All of us are, more than we could ever imagine. So much of what's broken today, I believe, stems from our inability to acknowledge, to accept, and to honor our human vulnerability. So much would become that much better if we could just admit it, that we need one another, that we need grace. And the truth is, if we can't receive this, if we can't admit this to ourselves, if we can't receive help and grace, we're not able to offer it in any deep way, in any meaningful way. And we'll find ourselves passing by others, not because we don't care, but because we haven't even learned to accept care for ourselves. How can we offer it to anyone else? At the end of the parable, Jesus doesn't ask who was the wounded man's neighbor. He asks who acted like a neighbor. He doesn't ask you who's in your circle. He asks you, are you willing to step out of your circle, to cross lines, to be there and show up for someone outside of it? Because neighborliness is not about a category. It's about action. And Jesus has flipped the question, who is my neighbor, to this one. To whom are you being called to be a neighbor? And maybe that's the question we need to ask more than ever. So here's my prayer, that we become a church that doesn't just preach about this and hear this parable, but actually does it, lives it in the world. That we become the kind of neighbors who refuse to walk away, who see God's beloved where we're conditioned to see our enemy. People who receive mercy when they need it and can extend it without strings to others when they need it. Because what the world needs now more than anything is not more noise, more blame, more walls being erected, but neighbors. People who cross the street and kneel in the rain and whisper, "You are not alone. I'm here with you." May God help us see with new eyes. May God challenge us to cross boundaries. May God continue to shape us again and again and again to become good neighbors. neighbors. Amen.